Germany's deindustrialization. Suddenly, a perfect storm has erupted over Europe's former economic powerhouse. If Europe's engine grinds to a halt, the continent's already polarized political landscape will explode. Germany's biggest companies seem to be abandoning it. This is by Matthew Carnich from Politico. Chemical giant BASF has been a pillar of German business for more than 150 years, underpinning the country's industrial rise with a steady stream of innovation that helped create the enviable Made in Germany. More recently, however, a $10 billion investment in a state-of-the-art complex that the company claimed could be the gold standard for sustaining manufacturing will not take place in Germany. Instead, it was erected 9,000 kilometers away in China. Even as it pursues its future in Asia, BASF, founded on the banks of the Rhine in Germany in 1865 as Badische Anilin Soda Fabrik, BASF for short, is trying to consolidate its activities in Germany. In February, the company announced the shutdown of a fertilizer plant in its hometown of Ludwigshafen, along with other facilities, resulting in about 2,600 job cuts, saying, "We are increasingly concerned about our domestic market," BASF Chief Executive Martin Brudermüller told shareholders in April, noting the company lost 130 million euros in Germany last year. "Profitability is no longer where it should be," he said. That malaise is now permeating the entire German economy, which slipped into recession the first quarter of 2023, amid a flurry of surveys showing that both companies and consumers are deeply pessimistic about the future. And this concern is valid. Nearly 20 years ago, Germany broke through the ranks of Europe's sickest with a package of ambitious labor market reforms that unleashed its industrial potential and ushered in a sustained period of prosperity, largely driven by strong demand for machinery and cars from China. And while the country disappointed many of its partners by exporting far more than it bought, its economy flourished. The boom times, however, came at a cost. Economic power lulled its leaders into a false sense of security. Their failure to pursue further reforms is now coming back to bite them. Suddenly, a perfect storm has erupted over the former European powerhouse, signaling that the current recession is not merely technical, as policy makers pray it is, but rather a harbinger of a fundamental reversal in its economic fortunes that threatens to send tremors across Europe and further upheaval in the continent's already polarized political landscape. Faced with a toxic cocktail of high energy costs, worker shortages, and red tape, many of Germany's biggest companies, from giants like Volkswagen and Siemens to a host of lesser-known, smaller ones, are experiencing a tough consolidation and are looking for greener pastures in North America and Asia. In the absence of an unexpected reversal, it's hard to avoid the conclusion that Germany is headed for a much deeper economic decline. Reports from the front are getting worse. Unemployment rose year on year by about 200,000 in June, a month when companies typically add jobs, although the overall unemployment rate remains low at 5.7%, and the number of job vacancies high at nearly 800,000. German officials are bracing for more bad news. "We are starting to feel the difficult economic conditions in the labor market," said the head of German Labor Office, Andrea Nahles. "Unemployment is rising and employment growth is losing momentum." New orders in the country's tech companies, long a key indicator of Germany's inc health, are falling sharply, falling 10% in May alone, the eighth straight decline. Similar weakness is evident across the German economy, from construction to chemicals. Foreign interest in the country as an investment destination is also waning. The number of new foreign investments in Germany fell in 2022 for the first consecutive year, reaching the lowest point since 2013. Many hear about creeping deindustrialization. It's not just creeping anymore, says Hans-Jürgen Volz, chief economist at the BVMW, an associate that lobbies for German Mittelstand, the thousands of small and medium-sized businesses that form the backbone of the country's economy. When Germany sneezes, to understand the long-term effects of deindustrialization, we need to look further than the US Rust Belt or the UK Midlands, once thriving industrial centers that fell victim to policy making and global competitive pressures and never fully recovered. However, in the case of Germany, the consequences would be on a continental scale. The country's dependence on industry makes it particularly vulnerable. With the exception of software maker SAP, Germany's technology sector is virtually non-existent. In the financial world, its biggest players are best known for bad bets, Deutsche Bank, and scandal-ridden Wirecard. Manufacturing accounts for 27% of its economy, compared to 18% in the US. An also related problem is that Germany's most important industrial sectors, from chemicals to automobiles and machinery, have their roots in 19th century technologies. While the country has thrived for decades by optimizing these products, many of them are either outdated, the internal combustion engine for example, or simply too expensive to produce in Germany. Looking at the metals, in March, the company that owns Germany's largest aluminum smelter said it would close its plant by the end of the year due to high energy costs. Such moves would be less worrisome if Germany had a strong history of economic diversification. Unfortunately, her track record on this front is patchy at best. Germany pioneered modern solar panel technology, for example, to become the world's largest producer in the early 2000s. After the Chinese copied German designs and flooded the market with cheap alternatives, Germany's solar panel manufacturers collapsed. In the field of biotechnology, Mainz-based company BioNTech has been at the forefront of mRNA vaccine development, but following that success, the company announced plans in January for what its founder called a huge investment in cutting-edge cancer research in the UK. Europe is getting cold. Innovation breeds economic growth. And as Germany's traditional industry declines, the question is, what big new thing will replace it? So far, nothing seems on the horizon. Germany ranks just 8th in the Global Innovation Index, an annual ranking compiled by UN's World Intellectual Property Organization. In Europe, it's not even in the top 3. In artificial intelligence, a technology that many analysts and observers believe will fuel economic growth in the next generation, Germany is already a loser. Only 4 of the 100 most cited AI scientific papers in 2022 were German. This compares with 68 for the US and 27 for China. Germany has nothing to offer in any of the most important future-oriented sectors, said Marcel Fratscher, head of German Economic Institute DIW. What's there is the old industry. The power of technology to transform an economy or leave it behind is evident when comparing the trajectories of Germany and the US over the past 15 years. During this period, the US economy, driven by the boom in Silicon Valley, expanded by 76% to $25.5 trillion. Germany's economy grew by 19% to $4.1 trillion. In dollar terms, the US added the equivalent of nearly 3 Germanys to its economy during this period. The erosion of Germany's industrial core will have a substantial impact on the rest of the European Union. Germany is not just Europe's biggest player, it also acts as the hub of a wheel connecting the region's diverse economies as the largest trading partner and investor for many of them. Over the past 3 decades, German industry has turned Central Europe into its factory. Porsche builds its SUVs, the Cayenne, the Slovakia, Audi builds engines in Hungary since the early 1990s, and leading appliance maker Miele manufactures washing machines in Poland. Thousands of small and medium-sized German companies, the so-called Mittelstand, which form the backbone of the country's economy, are active in the region, producing mainly for the European market. While they won't disappear overnight, a prolonged decline in Germany will inevitably drag the rest of the region down with it. There is a risk that Europe will end up being the loser in this turn, Klaus Rosenfeld, chief executive of auto parts maker Schaeffler, admitted recently. Noting his company is likely to set up its next factories in the US. Shortcomings? While the EU officials blame the region's independent deindustrialization on what they see as unfair US and Chinese policies that put European companies at a disadvantage, the problems in Germany run much deeper and are largely domestic, and they don't have easy solutions. Simply put, the formula that made Germany the industrial powerhouse of Europe, a highly skilled workforce and innovative companies fueled by cheap energy, has been upended. As a generation of baby boomers, now 57 to 75 years old, retires in the coming years, Germany is headed for a demographic cliff that will leave its companies without the engineers, scientists, and other highly skilled workers they need to remain competitive in the global market. Within the next 15 years, around 30% of Germany's workforce will reach retirement age. By the graying of the population, it's not the only problem. Young Germans yearn for secure jobs, not the kind of entrepreneurship and innovation that made the country one of the world's leading economies. Many young people would rather work for the public than start a business. Efforts to offset the growing labor shortage through immigration have so far failed. Although Germany continues to accept hundreds of thousands of asylum seekers each year, most of whom lack the skills companies need. A month ago, German lawmakers passed a new immigration law that removes many of the bureaucratic hurdles foreign skilled workers face in settling the country. Whether it will work is another question. Compared to the UK, Canada, or the US, Germany is a difficult country to live in due to high taxes, the difficulty of learning the language, and a culture that's often less welcoming to foreigners. A nearly 400-page government commission study published last month, for example, found that half of Germans held anti-Muslim views, since many of the highly educated workers in government would like to attract from Muslim countries like Turkey. This hostility is not something that works in its favor. Compounding these demographic challenges are rising energy costs in the wake of Russia's war against Ukraine and Germany's own efforts to combat climate change. By cutting off natural gas deliveries to Germany, the Kremlin effectively hit the axis of the country's business model, which it relied on for easy access to cheap energy. Although wholesale gas prices have stabilized, they're still about 3 times what they were before the crisis. This has left companies such as BASF, whose main German business alone would consume as much natural gas in 2021 as all of Switzerland, with no choice but to look for alternatives. In addition, the country's green transformation, the so-called energy wende, has made matters worse. As it lost access to Russian gas, the country turned off all nuclear power, and even after nearly a quarter century of subsidizing the expansion of renewables, Germany still does not have enough energy, enough wind turbines and solar panels to meet demand, leaving Germans paying 3 times the international average for electricity. The death of the car, das Auto. Although the German public seems oblivious to the financial challenges ahead, those on the front lines are under no illusions. Geopolitical developments have made it abundantly clear that our economic model is no longer a guarantee of prosperity, said Andreas Reid, chief executive of the Association of German Automobile Industry, the industry's main lobby, not even the famous Das Auto. The auto industry has driven Germany's fortunes for more than a century, and the country's economic future rests heavily on the sector's ability, which accounts for nearly a quarter of its output, to maintain its dominance of the luxury sector in a world of electric vehicles. But things do not look good. While companies have recently posted record profits helped by subdued demand in the wake of the pandemic, this boost looks more like a last gasp than a renewal. Long a source of national pride, The car industry has become Germany's Achilles heel and discomfort. For years, companies like Mercedes-Benz, BMW, and Volkswagen refused to abandon the initial combustion engine, rejecting Tesla and other early innovators. This strategic blunder opened the door not only for Elon Musk but also for China, which began investing heavily in the development of electric vehicles 15 years ago, as the Germans rejected the idea, giving them a very significant head start. Last year, Chinese manufacturers accounted for 60% of the more than 10 million all-electric cars sold worldwide. The Germans are already feeling the consequences of their miscalculations. Now, the big Chinese automakers will soon have to set up their own factories in Europe and maybe even in Germany, Hildebrand said, adding that it's trends that cannot be reversed. Now, a recent surge in the national polls of the far-right Alternative for Germany AfD party underscores stakes, although the rise of AfD is mainly due to growing disillusion with immigration policies. A poor economic situation would likely give the party a further boost. Social welfare is also a big point of unrest. Germany operates one of the most generous welfare states, with social spending accounting for 27% of the economy. Last year, compared to 23% of the US, with Berlin under pressure to spend far more on defense, belt tightening and the public backlash has already begun. In an economic downturn, the situation will only get worse. However, German industry is not completely abandoning Deutschland. They're happy to stay as long as the government pays them. This is a very long article. I've translated this for you from a Greek article. Please leave your comments and thank you for your support. Please support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.